with murder. So wait, death and the Maiden. 32 years, 7 months, and 9 days after Longview. Take thy fortune, thou find'st to be too busy is some danger. Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 4. The Civil Guard helicopter was warming up on the pad outside the station when Bob arrived and parked his car. He hopped into the aircraft, beside Tom Horakova, fastened his seatbelt, and a minute later they were in the air and headed southeast. "Who's the primary on the scene?" asked Bob. "One of your guys from the Anaconda Detachment, a Detective Sergeant Macpherson," replied Horakova. "Yeah, I know Mac. He's sharp and efficient. What do we know so far?" "First off, who found the body?" "A couple of labor service kids working at the guest house. They went into the indoor pool about 6:30 this morning for a quick dip, and they saw her floating in the deep end. They pulled her out, and the boy tried to resuscitate her, but she was long gone. I had a word with the Anaconda station commander last night, advising him that we were keeping an eye on our special guests out at the Fairmont, and they should contact me if there were any problems. So I got the call about 6:45. The local medical examiner will also be there by now, a Dr. Cantone." "Yeah, I know him too," said Campbell. He took out his phone, called the Anaconda Civil Guard station, and had them patch him through to Sergeant Macpherson at the Fairmont Lodge. He spoke at some length with Macpherson and the police doctor, then closed his phone. "Cantone ballpark's time of death at around midnight. Bella Sutcliffe was strangled with a thin cord or wire, a garrote. No weapon was found on the scene, no defensive wounds, nothing under her nails, no obvious sign of sexual assault. Looks like it all happened quick, neat, and clean. The body was then dumped in the pool. Probably so, the long soak would wash off as many forensic traces as possible," said Horakova. "A garrote sounds like a trained ONR assassin. Our buddy Scorpius, most likely." Campbell nodded. "Could be. She was last seen in the hotel bar at about 11, knocking back Blue Goose cocktails like they were going out of style." "What the hell is a Blue Goose?" asked Horakova. "Kind of a half-assed martini made out of vodka, lime juice, and some kind of liqueur," Campbell told him. "By all accounts so far, she held it pretty well, and she wasn't visibly drunk when she left the bar." "Alone?" asked Horakova. Mac didn't want to commit himself on that, since he hasn't had time to run down all the witnesses. She changed out of the jeans and denim blouse she was wearing at the dig site yesterday, and she was wearing a dark maroon single-piece summer dress and high heels, which is what she died in. The shoes were at the bottom of the pool. Mac says he gave her room a quick once-over, but nothing obviously hinky jumped out at him. No sign of a struggle in there, so she was presumably done in by the pool, or nearby. He's canvassing the staff and the guests now. We'll check them all out, of course, but obviously we'll be especially interested in the EPs who were staying overnight at the guest house. Some of them were there last night, and some of them drove back into Missoula yesterday and spent the night there to be present at the carbon dating of that fishhook we found. That would be our Oxford Don Fred Haskins, Dr. Fortis, Dr. Wyrick, Dr. Kellerman, and both the Martineos. The assistants Renfrew, Tarasone, and Haynes were staying overnight at the lodge where the killing took place. Your people are tracking all their GPIs from the boss office tech room, right? Vehicles, American Fleck cards, and their American and Euro personal chips? You need to check and make sure none of them drove back to Anaconda last night. Already done, first thing after I got the call, said Tom. Some movement around town to restaurants and such, but no one left Missoula. Among the Anaconda contingent, no one left the Fairmont after 8 p.m. or so. Dr. Arne Wingard was there as well, although we can't account for his movements, since the Republic isn't in the habit of tracking chips on our own people like they were exotic wildlife, whose migration patterns we want to study. "Wingard didn't go back to Missoula?" asked Campbell in some surprise. "No, but that's not unusual," Tom told him. "He has his own suite at the Fairmont, to save travel time to and from Lost Creek, which is understandable since he's always the first on site in the morning and generally the last to leave." Look, I don't think it's one of the EPs, I think it's Scorpius himself. We know he was already here before they arrived. It has to be a local. Jesus, you don't think Arne Wingard is Scorpius, do you?" "I doubt it," replied Campbell, shaking his head. "I took a look at his file when this business first came up, just for background. Wingard is a genuine political refugee. There's still a Euro warrant out on him for inciting to ethnocentrism, whatever the hell that means. He came home 15 years ago and he brought his wife and 2 children with him. His wife died of a brain hemorrhage. 4 years ago, his son and daughter are both grown and married, and he has grandchildren. He appears absolutely dedicated to his work and the university, and Allie thinks the world of him. He would have to be one hell of a long-term sleeper agent with an elaborately faked background, inserted years before anyone anywhere had any idea where the hell Lost Creek even was, never mind what was under it. While we both know that's possible, in fact, Wingard has been the guy who's ramrodded the whole Lost Creek project from the get-go, assembled and published all the evidence, and who pushed for this whole Eminent Persons visit to try and authenticate the discoveries here. If his secret mission is to bury the truth about our Aryan ancestors here in America, he's going about it in a strange way, when there were a dozen other means by which he could have sabotaged the project from the inside. I just mentioned it because if the killer of Bella Sutcliffe is Scorpius, he'll be a local with some kind of access to or inside knowledge of the dig, said Tom. Yeah, but I've been thinking about that. Just because somebody has access to the data here and transmitted it to the ONR doesn't mean they necessarily have access to the site itself. We may have to cast our net a bit wider, look for somebody at the university, most likely a recent arrival, in the past year or so, suggested Campbell. Somebody in the records or cataloging or clerical end who has or was able to get access to the data coming into the Fairmont Lodge helipad, sir, said the pilot into the headphones over their ears. Good, said Campbell. Let's see what this mess looks like close up. The first thing they saw from the air was a parking lot full of civil guard vehicles with flashing green and blue LED lights. The copter landed on a pad just beyond the outdoor pool, which was naturally heated by the former resort's well-known hot springs. Detective Sergeant Macpherson and his partner, a South African detective named Roloff Botha, came out to meet them. The men shook hands. Damn, got the chief of DS himself out for this one, said Macpherson, a lanky Montana native dressed in civilian jeans and jacket with sharp-toed leather cowboy boots and a Stetson hat. Botha was a lean, blonde young Afrikaner in simple work trousers and a windbreaker. How you been doing, Mac? Asked Campbell. Oh, I'm able to sit up and take a little nourishment from time to time. This is Captain Tom Horakova, Bureau of State Security, said Bob as they walked toward the hotel's main building. Yeah, I heard the trench coats were on this, said Macpherson, shaking Tom's hand. You really think this was done by an honest Hogod enemy agent? I think it's probable, Tom told them, a man or possibly a woman using the codename Scorpius. We don't know much about him, but we know he's been nosing around the Lost Creek archaeological site and transmitting just about everything there is to know about the dig to the ONR and LSS Pool Grande. Damn, swore Macpherson angrily. Bob and Tom noted he wore the 7 weeks ribbon over his left front pocket. Anyone who had been through the war and seen the shells and bombs and missiles crashing into the homeland had no time at all for America or America's spies. I have to say I'm not completely surprised. This was a cold kill. Northwesters who get ticked off at other people tend to use guns, or sometimes axes or bowie knives if they're in a more hands-on frame of mind. A noose isn't really indigenous to our rambunctious lifestyle here in the Republic. If you're right, why did this Scorpius character kill Miss Sutcliffe? Was she tied in with him in some way? We've no idea, said Bob. That's what we have to find out. Where do you want to start? Asked Macpherson. At the beginning, where else? Replied Bob. Bella Sutcliffe's body was lying beside the indoor pool, covered with a green plastic sheet. Macpherson flicked back the sheet, and Bob and Tom studied the dead face for a moment. Bella's tongue protruded from between her teeth, a bright cyanosed blue, and her eyes were red from the petechial hemorrhaging caused by the tightening noose. Guess she pushed one envelope too many, commented Tom. Guess so, replied Campbell. Did you find her purse, Mac? Found on the floor leaning against the wall over there, replied Macpherson. Just the usual items except for a packet of Chinese-manufactured condoms, which is weird. What the hell is a man gonna think of a woman who carries those things around with her? Why didn't she just hang a sign around her neck saying I'm a slut and I come prepared? It's normal in her culture, explained Campbell. They've abolished sluts by making all women that way. I am woman, hear me roar, and all that horse hockey. Be glad it wasn't certain other items. Find her phone? In the purse, replied Mac. "Dump it and check the whole chip, phone calls, stored data, everything," ordered Bob. "Waiting on the tech officer in his magic box now, Colonel." Campbell looked up at Dr. Edward Cantone, the Anaconda Guard Detachment's medical examiner and pathologist, a regular doctor who also worked in the town's clinic and took private patients as well. There weren't enough homicides to give him full-time employment with the guards. Cantone's qualifications would not have been recognized anywhere else in the world, because he was a graduate of Portland Medical University's medical school. PMU provided a stripped-down 4-year course that actually taught doctors how to treat injuries and heal sick people, as opposed to the American system of 8 years in school, 2 as an intern, and then specialization in some obscure part of the body to try and pay off a $1 million student loan debt sometime before they were 45. The American Medical Association contemptuously referred to Northwest medicos as Doc in the Box and paramedics with delusions of grandeur. The fact that Northwest medical researchers had discovered the cure for most forms of cancer and were working on the rest was simply ignored as Nazi propaganda. "On the phone you said no sign of sexual assault, Eddie?" asked Campbell. "Doesn't look like it," replied Dr. Cantone, a stocky man of about 40. "Consensual sex recently?" asked Tom Horakova. "Her boss file says this lady preferred quantity to quality, and the condoms bear that out." "Yeah, I heard you boys were in on this one," said Cantone. "Can't tell you here. Let me get her to town for a full workup and I'll let you know, but off the bat I'd say no. No mystery on the cause of death. One look at that tongue and those eyes tells the tale." "Any ideas on the ligature, Ed?" asked Macpherson. "Thin, not wire like a proper assassin's garrote. Probably something simple like nylon clothesline or even twine, something that would look innocuous if you find it in somebody's kitchen drawer or garage workshop. When I get her on the table, back at the morgue, I'll see if any fibers were left in the wound, and I may be able to tell you if it was twine or just plain rope. One thing, though." Cantone leaned down and lifted the dead woman's chin, with some effort. "She's in full rigor now. The warm water and the fact that she was last seen alive at 11 makes me pretty sure she died fairly soon afterward, hence the midnight give or take Todd, but again, I'll be able to tell more after the autopsy. Anyway, what I wanted to show you. See that bruise there just under the left jaw, about the side of a credit coin?" He pointed. "Not sure whether he used wooden grips on each end of the rope or some kind of knot or D-ring, but that was the actual pressure point for the noose. Not on the back of the neck. He didn't sneak up behind her. He strangled her from the front so he could watch her face while she died, and his face was the last thing she ever saw. Sadistic bastard." "Yeah, a real hero of the red, white, and blue," muttered Campbell in disgust. "Any chance she fought back, scratched him, got some blood or skin under her fingernails we can get DNA off of?" "Not that I can see. If so, the hours in the water probably washed all the traces away, but of course I'll check carefully." "Who found her exactly?" asked Campbell. Macpherson consulted his notes. "Martin Swart and Aaron Graham, both age 17, labor service employed here at the lodge. The Swart boy is the landscape gardener and one of several General Hefton tote helpers around the place, and Miss Graham is a waitress in the restaurant and receptionist as needed. They both live on the premises in the staff wing." "Married?" asked Campbell. "Not yet. No prom baby either. They're planning on getting married once he gets through Army Basic and gets his permanent duty station. Then they're headed for university, or UW Pullman, depending on what they want for their majors. The managers are a German immigrant couple named Thiessen, Gunther, and Anna. He's retired military. Been running the place about 4 years." "Where are the kids?" asked Campbell. "In the office behind the reception desk, Colonel," Macpherson told him. "The Thiessens are in the manager's office." "We'll talk to the kids first." Martin Swart was a stocky blonde boy and Aaron Graham a slim teenaged brunette. They were wearing sweatshirts over their bathing suits and seemed partly concerned and partly excited by having found themselves in the center of something major. The detectives introduced themselves. "Waar in Zuid-Afrika is Jew gezien? Prat G. Engels?" Detective Botha asked the boy. "Ja, meneer, I speak English," replied Martin. I was born in Bloemfontein, but when I was 8, my family made it onto Mooney's list and we got out, so I learned here in Montana. That's why I don't sound like a joppy." "You flew out with Captain Mooney?" asked Macpherson, impressed. "Over 300 people crammed onto one 60-year-old C-130? "Yes, sir," said the boy, and added nothing else. Mooney's long flight was legendary throughout the Republic. "I thought all South Africans still spoke English," remarked Horakova. "No, the ANC won't allow us to learn it now," said Swart. "We have to learn Zulu, Xhosa, or Swazi and speak it in public at all times." "Okay, you guys found the dead woman? Tell us about it," said Campbell. "You went in for a swim about 6:30 this morning?" "Yes, Colonel," said Martin. "The pool doesn't open until 7, but the Thiessens don't mind if we get in a few lengths before that. Besides, most of the guests who want to swim early use the outdoor pool this time of year because of the hot springs. It's quite lekker, but the indoor pool is more private?" suggested Campbell. "Yes, sir," replied Martin. "Don't misunderstand, Colonel. Marty and I are both Christians and we're not doing anything we shouldn't," said the girl, blushing. "It's just that we're both competition-grade swimmers. It's how we met, at Hemingway High in Boise. We have separate rooms, you know." "None of our business, ma'am," replied Campbell. "We just need to know about your finding Miss Sutcliffe. She just checked in last night, but did you see her alive at any time before this morning?" "I checked her in along with all the other foreigners, yes, sir," said Aaron. "What was your impression of them coming in?" asked Tom Horakova. "They were all excited about some hook they'd found out at the Lost Creek archaeology site," she said. "Their conversation I heard was all about that." "How about Bella Sutcliffe?" asked Campbell. "She seemed kind of hyper," said the girl carefully. "I don't want to speak ill of the dead really, but some of her comments were, well, off-color. Bawdy, I suppose you'd call them. Rabelaisian, if you want to get classical about it." "Yes, I remember," replied Campbell with a sad chuckle. "Rabelaisian. I get the impression she would have liked it. Well, ladies aren't supposed to be Rabelaisian. Not here, anyway," said the girl primly. "Did you see her at all after check-in?" asked Tom. "No, sir," she said. "I got off at 9 and went to the employees' lounge out back, and I read until 10 and then I went to bed." "Read what?" asked Macpherson curiously. "Well, a Jean Plaidy novel," she said, slightly embarrassed. "You're a 17-year-old. Girl, you're supposed to be a romantic," Campbell reassured her with a chuckle. "And you never saw Miss Sutcliffe again after you got off duty? Alive, I mean?" "No, sir," said the girl. "I did," said Martin. "I was helping out Mr. Thiessen behind the bar until 10, and then I went to bed as well. We're told she left around 11, so you didn't see her go?" "No, sir." "Who was tending bar when you left?" asked Tom. "Gunther, that's Mr. Thiessen," he told them. "He and Anna, that's Mrs. Thiessen, take turns behind the bar on alternate nights." "How was Miss Sutcliffe behaving when you were there?" asked Bob. Generally, she was kind of boisterous. Not drunk, really, just kind of loud and brassy, like you'd expect an American woman to act." "Indeed," said Tom. "Was she talking to anyone in particular?" "Mostly the other foreigners," said young Swart, "about archaeology and stuff. She also sat at one of the tables and talked with Dr. Wingard for a long while. About the same kind of stuff, carbon dating and stone tools and such, at least so far as I could hear." "Who else was in the bar besides the foreign scientists?" asked Tom. "Just other guests here, or any local people. Just residents, so far as I recall," said the boy. "This is a state guest house for people traveling on official business. Our lounge is just a little pub more for convenience than anything else, so the guests don't have to drive into town for a drink and a little company and a little music. Not exactly a jumping joint. Sometimes local people come out here when they're invited by our residents, but there's a lot better pubs and cafes in Anaconda, if they want to have a good time. No locals came in last night that I can remember." "Meaning they were all party or government people," said Tom with a significant glance at Bob. "All from out of town, though?" "Yes, sir," said Martin. "Let's see, there was the Jorgensens, husband and wife, who both work for the education ministry. They're some kind of accountants. There was Mr. Belazaire from the Ministry of Culture, and Mr. Fetterman, and a couple of guys from the NBA who were out here shooting background film for some program about early settlers in Montana, and some others. Mr. Thiessen would know who they are. Did Bella socialize with any of them? Asked Bob. She sat and talked with Mr. Speidel from Northwest Power and Light for a while, said Swart. She was kind of flirty with him, but then she was like that with all the male patrons. I got the impression she just likes being around men. Liked, I should say. She didn't talk much with any of the women. Maybe we're looking for a jealous wife or girlfriend? Suggested Botha. With a garrote in her purse? Asked Campbell. I hope not. Wait a minute, you mentioned a Mr. Speidel. Dave Speidel, the Tesla power engineer? He turned to Horakova. Jason and I met him yesterday out at Lost Creek. He was talking to Bella Sutcliffe. He mentioned he actually works out of CDA, so he must stay here when he's in Anaconda. Yes, sir, said Swart. He goes all up and down the eastern part of the country, checking on remote reception towers out on farms and ranches and such, doing any adjustments or minor repairs that need doing. He always stays here when he's in the area. Okay, thanks guys, said Campbell. We may want to talk to you again, but I think that about covers it. He turned to Macpherson. Where's the manager's office? Gunther Thiessen turned out to be a slim man in his late 50s with an erect bearing and a handsome Teutonic face, simply but crisply dressed in sharp creased trousers and windbreaker, with well-clipped gray hair. His wife Anna was a small woman of about the same age who managed to look energetic simply sitting down, and who immediately leaped up, poured 4 cups of latte coffee from a large pot, and offered the police a large tray of cookies and strudel. The office was paneled in oak and had its own fireplace. Campbell was struck by the wall over the mantelpiece, which was covered with Herr Thiessen's military memorabilia. He stepped over to look at the photographs and trophies, some clearly of Thiessen in his younger days, some of several young men in more modern NDF garb whom Campbell took to be Thiessen's sons, as well as a blonde girl with a small boy in her lap. The next thing that caught his eye was Thiessen's mounted plaque of decorations, including not 1 but 2 iron crosses, one from the Battle of Portland and one from the 7 Weeks' War. He nodded, impressed. Then he saw a shield with a coat of arms on the wall next to it, displaying an iron cross in the top left quarter, the letters PG in the lower left, a stylized bridge in the lower right, and in the top right the letters SA in Germanic fracture lettering. He whistled. Herr Thiessen, he said, do I understand this correctly? You were one of the stormtroopers in Baumgarten's original Panzer Grenadiers at the Battle of Portland, one of the first men over the barricades on the I-5 bridge? Ja, said Thiessen. Not so much a man, though. I was 17 years old, the exact same age as our young South African Martin, the university's chancellor. Jason Stockdale was on the I-5 as well, a few companies behind you, said Tom. I know Comrade Stockdale. I meet him most years at our reunions. How did you end up in the PGs at such a young age? Asked Bob curiously. How did you even get into the United States? I seem to recall that by then they had virtually halted all white immigration from Europe. I came from Stuttgart to New York on a false passport stating dat. I was a Jewish rabbinical student named Isidor Weiss, a National Socialist inside joke, which needless to say, the stupid nigger immigration agent at the airport did not understand. I made my way Nordwest, hoping to find the NVA somehow. For years, all of the youth of Germany had watched the news with joy and fascination, knowing that here Aryan people were fighting again against the darkness as our ancestors did. It became a kind of hope and contest among us, to find ways to get to America legally or otherwise, to get to the Nordwest and somehow become part of it. I arrived in Seattle during the July days, when I heard Herr General Baumgarten was raising a German-speaking regiment, and so my timing turned out to be perfect. I stayed on in the NDF after independence, through the 7 weeks. It says you were a sergeant major on your retirement, commented Tom, looking at Thiessen's framed honorable discharge. Why not an officer with your background? If I may ask. I am what our enemies sometimes refer to as a good German, replied Thiessen with a chuckle. I preferred obeying orders to giving dem. Officers have too much to worry about. Have you found out anything about who murdered that poor woman? Asked Anna Thiessen. Somewhat to his surprise, she had no accent at all. Not yet, ma'am, he replied. It's early days yet, though. This is superb strudel, by the way. Cheese, not apple. Yes, she said. Topfenstrudel. I'm actually Austrian. Like the Führer. So how can we help you to catch dish fine? Asked Thiessen. We need to trace Miss Sutcliffe's last few hours. You were tending bar in your lounge last night until closing? Asked Campbell. Yes. I sent Martin off at 10. Young people need sleep. Miss Sutcliffe left the bar at around 11? About 10, yes. She didn't leave with anyone, in particular? Pressed Campbell. No, I'm sure of it, said Thiessen. Veach Rasser surprised me. One vold normally not speaks of a lady, but she seemed to be, how do the Americans put it, a panther on the hunt. A cougar on the prowl, corrected Anna. I am not a prude, Colonel, said Thiessen. D say things are going to happen in any hotel. I do not meddle in my guests' affairs, in any sense of the term, so long as they are discreet, and do not offend the other guests by public display, although I do try to keep a fatherly eye on Martin and Aaron and the other young people from the Arbeitsdienst who work here, who are perhaps not fully adult enough for such things. Lest I give the wrong impression, I must say that Miss Sutcliffe was not drunk or offensive in any way, just rather outgoing, let us say, who was still in the bar after she left. Asked Tom Horakova. Herr Dr. Wingard, de Scotsman Herr Dr. Renfrew, de American with de Italian name Tari something, de English lady Dr. Haynes, and Herr Speidel from de Electric, recited Thiessen. All the other guests had left? Asked Macpherson. Yes, the Scotsman and the Englishwoman were veer teaching the Italian how to play proper billiards, not pool, and talking about archaeology. Really a rather staid group. I don't imagine the lounge in a government guest house would get too boisterous, remarked Tom. You would be surprised, Herr Captain, said Thiessen with a smile. Sometimes we get vor crews from the highways or cowboys from cattle drives dropping in when they are camped nearby. We have had no serious trouble here, but I have a gun check in the lounge. You don't hand over your weapon, you don't drink here, and if I think you are too drunk to be responsible, you don't get it back until you are sober. This was the one common sense restriction on firearms the Northwest Republic allowed, in the face of some protest from the purists, proprietors, and managers of any place that served alcohol, had the right at their discretion to ban guns, or require them to be checked at the door. Most did, since customers gunning one another down might make for exciting Western movies, but in real life, it was bad for business. The Northwest Republic was a nation of gun enthusiasts, but mostly responsible ones who understood that gunpowder and alcohol don't mix. Okay, who left after Miss Sutcliffe? Asked Campbell. I believe it was Herr Speidel a few minutes later, said Thiessen. Tom and Bob glanced at one another. Dave Speidel, the power guy's name, was popping up with strange frequency. You close at midnight? Asked Macpherson. And you stayed behind for a few minutes locking up? Yes, Detective Sergeant. That was about the time we believe the homicide may have occurred, said Macpherson. The indoor pool is down that long hallway from reception, and the stairs and elevators are right by the reception desk. So if you stayed behind for a few minutes to close, you wouldn't have seen anybody slip down the corridor into the pool area? Unfortunately not, I'm afraid, said Thiessen, shaking his head. We'll have to grill the hell out of all of them on that, said Macpherson. Will they tell us the truth, sir? Bob shrugged. He honestly didn't know. Did you notice or did anyone report any strange cars in the parking lot, anyone who isn't staying in the lodge hanging around? Asked Tom. No, said Thiessen. He looked at his wife. Anna? No, I saw no strangers and no one else did so far as I know, she said. Do you have any night security, Herr Thiessen? Asked Campbell. Any alarm systems that would go off if an intruder broke in or forced a door? Why would we need such a thing? The German asked with a shrug. This is the Northwest Republic. Times like these, I wish we weren't such a free country and we had spy cameras all over the place like the Americans do, sighed Macpherson. I understand that there were such things here before the revolution, but when the state took over this place, they pulled all of the alarms and the cameras out, said Thiessen. With no niggers or Mexicans, there was no need. Colonel, do you believe this woman was killed by someone staying here in the hotel? Campbell answered carefully. We believe we know in a general way who killed Miss Sutcliffe, a person we only know by a nickname, and we have no idea who that person is or why they murdered her. It is of course possible that the killer came in from the outside. But not likely? Asked Thiessen. I just don't know, said Campbell frankly. We need some solid evidence one way or the other. Thiessen sighed, went to a drawer, and pulled out 2 small but heavy-caliber automatic pistols in clip-on holsters. He stuck one on his belt and handed the other to his wife. "I understand, Date, of course you haven't ruled out Anna and myself as suspects, Colonel, so you cannot officially involve us in investigation. Although V certainly would have no motive to murder a complete stranger V met only yesterday. But if there is a murderer living in my hotel, this fact displeases me very much. My wife and I must safeguard our guests and ourselves, so V will keep a sharp eye out and tell you immediately if anything appears in any way suspicious or unusual." "Thank you, Herr Thiessen," said Campbell. After they left the office, he said, "Mac, you and both go give Bella Sutcliffe's room a full going over from top to bottom. You're looking for anything, indicating she had contact with anyone local or anyone in the whole Republic for that matter. Let me know what Tech comes up with from her phone. Once you finish there, get back on with the canvas. Staff and our guests first for elimination purposes. I doubt if any of them have anything to do with this. Only Dr. Wingard has any connection with Lost Creek, and I honestly think we can rule him out. Tom and I will take the foreigners and see if we can track their movements from the bar to their rooms, and see if any of them will admit to seeing anything off-kilter, anyone slipping in or out of that corridor that leads to the indoor pool. In the meantime, could you ask all the APs to gather in the lounge? I need to give them a pep talk. Jesus, in all the hurly-burly I completely forgot to ask, has anyone even thought to notify Jason Stockdale as to what the hell's going on?" "I took the liberty of doing so while I was waiting for you at the copter, sir," said Tom. "He will have informed the other EPs by now. Good. That means I don't have to. Also, Mac, could you find David Speidel from Northwest Power and Light and ask if he can stick around and not go out on his rounds or whatever today before we speak with him?" "Yes, sir," said Macpherson. After he and Botha left, Horakova turned to Bob. "So what now? Do we have a word with Speidel?" "Not quite yet. Contact your office, Tom, and I'll contact mine, and have them send anything they have on Mr. Speidel, either criminal or security-wise, to our phones. We're not Americans, and we don't keep files on people unless they've actually done something, so it may not be much, but this guy seems to be the only local connection to emerge so far between the victim and the Lost Creek site and the scene of the crime, so it's the most promising lead we've got. We need to know as much as we can about him before we tackle him." Bob's phone beeped, and he answered it. "Yes? When?" "Beautiful. I'm looking forward to it with joyous anticipation." He hung up. That was Jason. The rest of the EPs are on their way down here. The university arranged a copter for them, and they're already in the air, so they'll be here soon. They'd been told what happened to Bella, and some of them appear to think we had something to do with it. "Us? Why, for pity's sake?" demanded Tom. "What possible motive could we have to do any of them in, given the PR disaster?" "Logic has got nothing to do with it, Tom," said Campbell morosely. "These people are convinced that we are all demons from the 9th circle of hell. They've been told that all their lives. They'll probably pack their gear and run," said Tom morosely. "Maybe that's the object of the exercise, to warn the whole group off. Let's make those calls about Speidel and go talk to the others. Maybe we can persuade them to stay and complete their job, although God knows what they'll say about us when they get home. Never mind how this will affect their whole report on Lost Creek. The excavation will probably get lost in all the hysterical screaming." "I think that may be what our buddy boy from out there has in mind," suggested Tom. On their way to the lounge, they were waylaid in the lobby by Dr. Arne Wingard. He looked stricken. "Colonel, what the hell is happening? Who did this? Who murdered Dr. Wyrick's assistant?" Campbell sighed. "We think it is a foreign intelligence operative, most likely from the Office of Northwest Recovery, who has orders to screw up the visit of the Eminent Persons delegation and discredit the Lost Creek site and its findings in the eyes of the world." "How do you know that?" demanded Wingard. "All right, I suppose at this point you need to know," said Tom Horakova with a sigh. "Recently, the Bureau of State Security was made aware that virtually every bit of information about Lost Creek, including a complete list of all the artifacts you've recovered, full schematics of the dig including subsonic ground surveys, all the chemical and carbon-14 dating results, a complete list of everyone working on the dig, photos, the whole 9 yards, have been transmitted to the Office of Northwest Recovery in the past few weeks. there is apparently an enemy agent using the codename Scorpius, who is very, very close to this project." "Mother of God," gasped Wingard. "Who do you suspect?" "No one so far," said Campbell. "We haven't got a line on him or her yet, although I promise you, sir, we will." What can I do?" Wingard asked in a dazed voice. "Keep Lost Creek going and prove to the world that the white man was here on this continent first, in spite of all their murder and treachery," said Campbell. "Done," said the archaeologist without hesitation. "In the meantime, I will be posting guardsmen all around the site and here in the Fairmont and everywhere else where there's any possibility this son of a bitch might strike again," said Campbell grimly. "But why on earth would he kill Bella Sutcliffe?" "We don't know, Dr. Wingard," said Campbell. "But by God, we're going to find out." Detective Botha materialized at Campbell's side. "Colonel, a helicopter has just landed outside, with the rest of the foreign delegation on board." "Great," sighed Bob. "Show them into the lounge with the others. I suppose I might as well talk to them all at once. In the meantime, you and Sergeant Macpherson get on with it, starting with Bella Sutcliffe's room. Tear it apart. She must have been communicating with Scorpius, and we have to find out how." When the four of them walked into the small, cozy lounge bar of the Fairmont, they were met by 9 pairs of eyes. The French couple were wary. The British were cold and alert, even the previously friendly Dr. Frederick Haskins. The Canadian and American faces were angry and hostile, and Dr. Amanda Wyrick had been weeping. There was something else, an undercurrent of fear. Bob Campbell understood that he now faced not just a homicide investigation. He had run up against more than a century of history. In these 9 people, he faced generation after generation of carefully inculcated hate propaganda, racial stereotyping, social engineering, and the officially sanctioned, collective vilification of any white person, especially any white male, who dared to disagree with the blind dogma of the Western world's religion of secular humanism, of liberalism and multiculturalism. His enemy now was not a single killer, but the deranged moral absolutes no longer even of equality, but of inherent and irredeemable white male evil. These visitors themselves were white, and yet through some dark alchemy, political correctness had separated them from their genes and their heritage and any awareness of their identity. He suddenly understood that to these people, the black and brown things that swarmed their own lands were at least on some level us, while the white people of the Northwest, their very brothers and sisters in blood, were the other. For them, quite literally, white was black and black was white. This was how the Third Reich, South Africa, Rhodesia, and the American South had perished. Their white peoples had been turned into the other in the eyes of the rest of their race. Not for the first time, Bob marveled in his mind at what the Jew had accomplished. These people had been warned that they were coming to a land of savages, of sick and homicidal bigots and brutes, and now the bloody proof was before them, in the form of Bella Sutcliffe's murdered body, lying out beside the pool. Campbell knew he didn't just have to find a killer, he had to save Lost Creek. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he did, Amanda Wyrick leaped to her feet and shouted, "Did you do this? Did you people kill her? Why?" Bob Campbell fought back the urge to argue, to expostulate, to try and reason with the woman. He knew from his own knowledge, from the memory of his own few horrible months out there, that this was something beyond reason. For once, the truth was something that had to be felt and not thought. He hoped he could make them all feel it. "No, ma'am," he told her simply. "We did not." He looked at them all. "I won't try to convince you. If all of you truly do believe in the privacy of your own thoughts that we are some kind of devils in human form, then I can't convince you otherwise. I told you before that you are all free to go anywhere you want while you're in this country, and that includes being free to leave it. If you genuinely believe that for some bizarre and inexplicable reason, we decided to murder one of your group and throw her into a swimming pool, then of course I don't expect you to stay with homicidal hosts. By all means, pack your things and leave. Chancellor Stockdale will arrange for your passage back to your own countries, and there will be no delays or any attempt to prevent you. But I hope you won't do that," Bob went on. "We believe that Bella Sutcliffe was murdered in order to throw sand and cast a cloud over the entire Lost Creek project and distract the attention of the world from the meaning of what is being discovered there. I regret to say that the killer may have achieved his object in doing so. There's nothing like the murder of an attractive young woman to upstage a scientific discovery, no matter how earth-shaking, especially in societies which long ago decided to substitute scandal, sensation, and voyeurism for news and serious thought. I am asking you not to let this murderer win. I am asking you to stay and continue observing the work at Lost Creek, and when you get home to write a fair and objective critique of what you see here, because I'm convinced that is why Bella Sutcliffe died. To make sure you don't do that. How do we know the rest of us will be safe? Demanded Letitia Haynes. You don't, said Campbell. If you choose to stay, you will have a choice. You can accept protection from the civil guard, the regular. Police, not boss. And yes, we carry weapons when need be, and I assure you, we know how to use them. Or if you're more distrustful and afraid of us than the real killer, you can choose not to have such protection. I told you before, we believe in freedom and individual responsibility here. But if you want our help, it's yours. That's what this republic is here for. In everything. Detective Botha entered the room and whispered into Bob's ear. Campbell spoke up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask all of you to step outside. Back out to the helicopter pad, please, he told them. We're evacuating the lodge. Why? Demanded Amanda Wyrick. We've just found something concealed in Bella Sutcliffe's room. It appears to be a bomb. The Northwest Civil Guard had always maintained a notably expert and efficient bomb squad. There were several reasons for this, starting with the fact that back when the Guard was first organized in the months after Longview, its personnel comprised both bomb disposal officers from the old regime's multiple police forces who had disarmed and dismantled NVA explosive devices, and some of the same men who had made and planted those devices. There had been numerous calls on the squad's expertise down through the intervening years. During the 7 Weeks' War, when the Guard had been subsumed into the NDF for the duration, their end-of-day people had disarmed and neutralized everything from artillery and mortar shells on up to unexploded cruise missile and Predator drone warheads, and sometimes still did so when these were found buried in the dirt in out-of-the-way places, or the wreckage of aircraft brought down by blue lights. Periodically, the Office of Northwest Recovery and various small factions and cells, some of them minuscule gangs of Christian Zionist lunatics, some of them fronts financed and operated by NGOs with credible deniability like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, would conduct bombing campaigns within the Northwest Republic. The purpose of these murder sprees was not so much to overthrow the government and force reunification with the United States, as it was to maintain a propaganda illusion in the U.S. and East Canada that there was some kind of indigenous, pro-American or pro-Ottawa resistance movement within the NAR, and to use that illusory notion as a fundraising device. Just as the old FBI and Bat Fay had regularly fabricated legal cases against so-called white supremacists any time there was a threat of a budget cut to the Spokane or Seattle office, as in the infamous Edgar Steele case, so these old-line liberal and Jewish outfits fabricated secret cells of loyal red, white, and blue freedom fighters, who of course needed immense amounts of funding to continue their heroic resistance against the evil, hate-mongering racist entity. Given the blind hatred which the Jewish and liberal world felt for the NAR, it worked fairly well. The Southern Poverty Law Center's cash reserve, long fabled in song and story, now stood at an estimated $500 million. Its white and Jewish directors and staff lived in their own posh suburb of Montgomery, Alabama called Deestown, a self-contained and heavily fortified enclave with its own power plant, food production, educational system, and paramilitary police force to protect the apostles of tolerance and diversity from all that bloody diversity seething and raging just beyond the barbed wire and corrugated steel barricades. The result was that every few years a few bombs went off, a few NAR citizens were killed and maimed, a few of the paid assassins were caught before they could escape the country and swung on the gallows on the 6 o'clock news, and the WPB planted a few retaliatory bombs in appropriate spots around the U.S., not forgetting to pay a visit to Deestown, of course. After a few such incidents reintroduced the guilty parties to the fascinating concepts of personal responsibility for one's actions, and what goes around comes around, What was left of the American authorities would rein in the ONR or the NGOs and get them to cool it for a few years. This meant that Guard Lieutenant Rod Whistler had hands-on experience in virtually every type of explosive and detonation system in current use, but this time he was stumped. "I don't know what the hell it is," he admitted to Bob Campbell roughly. An hour after the Fairmont Lodge had been evacuated. "I'm not even sure it's a bomb. It might be some kind of EMP device." "Electromagnetic pulse?" asked Campbell. "They want to disrupt our computers and electronics?" "Could be, sir," said Whistler. "I've never seen a bomb that actually has to be plugged in to detonate, not even a dry cell battery in there." They were examining the device on a computer monitor. An open aluminum briefcase containing the object now lay on a heavy industrial plastic baseplate inside an armored detonation trailer, parked several hundred yards from the hotel. The trailer had strong and heavy walls in addition to the baseplate, but the roof was mere canvas. The force of any exploding device would not be compressed, but directed upward into the air. Whistler had considered moving the thing out of the hotel in a mobile wheeled bin also designed to direct any blast upward, but since the stairs were too bumpy, and he wasn't sure whether it had a motion sensor that might trigger it in the event of a slight jarring of the elevator, he had attired himself in bakelite and fiberglass body armor, including a camera-equipped helmet. After shooing everybody out of the hotel, he calmly closed the briefcase and slowly, carefully carried it out of Bella Sutcliffe's room, down the hall, down the stairs, and out of the building. He then carefully opened the briefcase again, locked it inside the trailer with the monitoring camera, and now he was trying to puzzle out what he was dealing with. The device that lay inside the briefcase looked strange, like some kind of machine from a 1950s science fiction movie. It consisted of 4 fat-looking smoked green glass tubes approximately 14 inches long and 3 inches in diameter, with odd nipple-like projections on both ends. A third nipple or globe of glass protruded from the center top of each tube. The tubes were attached together in a single row with aluminum brackets, nuts, and bolts, and the entire set bolted to a square aluminum frame. Mounted on the front of the frame was a standard NAR 220-volt socket box, facing outward as the briefcase opened, and from the open back, 4 short blue wires connected each to the front end of the 4 tubes. To the right of the socket was a smaller black plastic box with a digital readout window. "Okay, even I can figure this out. Obviously you're supposed to plug it in, either to a house current or a UPS, a battery," said Campbell, pointing to the socket. "Yes, sir, and I'd be willing to bet that's a timer," said Whistler. "Once it's plugged into a UPS, or just with an extension cord, you set the timer for X number of minutes, or however long you want. And when the clock runs out, it turns the socket on and those tubes get electricity. When the circuit is connected, the juice goes in the tubes and something is supposed to happen. Probably something nasty, but what?" "So there must be some kind of detonator in the tubes," said Tom Horakova. "Not necessarily, Captain," said Whistler. "It could be some kind of gas or compound that would ignite without a detonator. Natural gas or a hydrogen-oxygen mix, or maybe simple black powder or gun cotton. But if so, you wouldn't get much of a blast from anything this small. Whatever kind of charge it is, it must be pretty potent. Ordinary powder would just make this a big firecracker. Plastique or Semtex would require a detonator cap, yes, but if that's what this is, it's a damned funny way to wire it. I don't see anything that looks like a standard cap. I loosened the connectors a bit when I was looking it over upstairs, although I didn't try to actually pull one out. All I saw was what looked like a small flat silver ribbon or filament going into the tube. As near as I can see, it's not even a complete circuit." "Why glass?" asked Tom. "Why not iron or steel pipe for better shrapnel?" "No idea, sir. Let's run a diagnostic." Whistler tapped on the laptop and the sensors inside the van began to whir, although they could not be heard 100 feet away. What the hell?" "What is it?" asked Campbell. "No chem traces of any known explosive, Colonel, and the microwave density probe indicates that the tubes are empty." "Huh?" asked Horakova. "So the bomb isn't fully loaded yet?" No, sir. As I read this, they're really empty. Those thingamies are plain, old-fashioned vacuum tubes, big ones." "Like the first radios used?" asked Campbell. "Yes, sir," said Whistler with a nod. "Okay. Why? Let me think. Something about this looks familiar. I seem to remember something from high school science class back in Calgary. Well, I'll be damned. I know. Those are Rontgen tubes. I'll bet that filament I saw really was silver. Sorry, Lieutenant, you've lost me, said Campbell, shaking his head. The first X-ray devices from 1895, if I remember correctly, explained Whistler. Basically, when you shoot electricity through a vacuum tube, you get cathode rays, and at certain frequencies or wavelengths, you get the kind of electromagnetic radiation known as X-rays. He tapped some keys on his laptop and studied a series of digital readings. Yep, those tubes are radioactive, 80% CPM, not dangerously high above normal background for this area, but enough for me to know somebody's revved that thing up recently. Which in a sense is almost as dangerous as if it was a bomb, although not as destructive. In what way? Asked Campbell keenly. There's no shielding and no directional focus on that damned thing, sir, said Whistler. It's not an actual X-ray machine, it's just a device for generating X-rays, if you get the difference. It's medically useless. As near as I can see, you hook it up and you start running current through it, and what you get is X-rays flying every which way. Too much exposure can be fatal, not to mention causing all kinds of tissue damage and brain damage and cancer. Probably wouldn't take too long either, depending on how many rads those museum pieces generate, which would in turn depend on the voltage and amperage of the power source, but I'd guess it's a lot of damned rads. A potentially deadly amount. It's an odd kind of destructive device for the ONR or whoever is behind this to use, but it's a killer nonetheless. It's a good way they can poison people without slipping arsenic in their beer or whatever. But if there's no shielding, wouldn't the person who activated the device also be exposed? Asked Horakova. Yes, but I suppose that like most bombers, he or she doesn't plan on being around for that part, said Whistler with a grim smile. Damn, muttered Campbell. That bitch. What the hell was she planning on doing with this bloody thing? Probably setting it off where Allie and Bobby would get caught in it. If I'd known, I would have strangled her myself. Lieutenant, you say this infernal thing has been used or fired recently. The Rontgen tubes are emitting a low level of X radiation, yes sir, so I'd say somebody fired it up in the last 24 hours. It's not dangerous now, but it would have been when that occurred. Dear God, she might have been running it last night and blasting X-rays throughout the entire hotel, hissed Tom Horakova. Maybe she left the bar at 11, went up to her room and plugged this bastard in, then left her room to try and clear out of the building. Then she went down to the indoor pool where she met somebody who strangled her and dumped her in the drink? Queried Campbell. Like Sherlock Holmes said, it is a capital error to theorize without data. Lieutenant, when you found this device, did you find a power source, an extension cord, anything that looked like it might have been used to plug this thing in? No, sir, Whistler told him. Nor was the timer set. You see it there just as we found it. He gestured to his computer screen. I understand that Detective Botha actually discovered the device inside one of the decedent's larger suitcases. He also pointed out to me some clothing of hers that was piled on the floor of her closet, almost like it had been removed from the suitcase to make room for the aluminum briefcase. So she didn't bring the briefcase in with her, which we seem to have confirmed since nobody remembers seeing it, said Horakova. As it happens, both Dr. Wingard and David Speidel have similar briefcases they use for carrying work material, but both of theirs are accounted for. Macpherson checked. Could someone have planted the X-ray bomb or whatever it is in Bella Sutcliffe's room? In which case she's not a spy, she's an innocent victim, and there is most likely no connection between her and her killer. Sure, just what we need, a little extra complication to make this case more interesting, muttered Campbell. You have a hazmat officer on your team, Lieutenant Whistler, and a Geiger counter? Yes, sir, 2, myself and Sergeant Swanpole. Go over the hotel and see if the place is going to be glowing in the dark after sunset. Have your paramedic check out the guests as well, Campbell ordered. If any of them had been exposed sometime last night, how long would it take for them to show symptoms of radiation poisoning? With something as raw as an X-ray overdose, we'd know pretty quick, sir, said Whistler. If I recall my training, there would be burns, maybe 3rd degree, violent nausea and vomiting, extreme pain, fever and heart arrhythmia, skin peeling off and flaps, good stuff like that, very soon after exposure. But I've never had to deal with anything like this, Colonel. You might want to call in an NDF biowar officer, And I think we need to take this contraption back down to Missoula and show it to an engineer and figure out just how it works and how much X radiation it throws out, what its range would be, and how powerful. After Whistler went to get his sergeant and the Geiger counters, Campbell rubbed his chin meditatively. Tom, does this make any kind of sense to you? What an odd weapon for the ONR to use. Why? What's it all in aid of, and how does the killing of Bella Sutcliffe figure into it? I think we need to talk to two people, said Horakova. Amanda Wyrick, because she knew Bella best, in fact the only one here who really did know her so far as we are aware. And that NP and L guy Spidel, because he seems to have appeared on the scene right when she did. Wyrick's out at the diggy. With Campbell's permission, Dr. Arne Wingard had taken the rest of the Eminent Persons on out to the Lost Creek site. Normally one wouldn't disperse witnesses on a homicide case like that, but Campbell didn't want them sitting around brooding and getting paranoid. The devil made work for idle hands. He decided that the best way to make them temporarily forget the loss of a colleague and get them sufficiently interested to stick around and not embarrass the Republic by fleeing while screaming bloody murder was to get them out on the site and thinking about old bones. Let's have a word with Spidel. Where is he? Mrs. Thiessen is serving a kind of brunch out by the outdoor pool, said Horakova, making a virtue of a necessity until we tell them it's all right to go back inside. I don't think the other guests have anything to do with this, sir. They're all regulars and they've been here before all this Lost Creek business came up. The Thiessens know them. Okay, cut them loose. Except for Spidel. Horakova's phone buzzed and he answered it. Horakova. Yes, Kathy? He does? Aha, hang on. He looked up at Campbell. Spidel has a political file. He does he? Get the skinny on it and catch up with me. Campbell went up to the remaining guests who were clustered around the pool, some of them sipping coffee or sitting at the white wrought iron tables munching a late breakfast. Comrades and citizens, thank you very much for your patience, he said to the group. I gather you've already given your statements to Sergeant Macpherson or Detective Botha. If that's the case, then we need to detain you no longer. I know you have things you need to be doing. Mr. Spidel, could you stay for a bit? Spidel stayed. He seemed somewhat edgy as Campbell sat down at the white wrought iron table by the pool. Mind if I grab some of that coffee? He asked. Be my guest. Mrs. T makes a great pot. Why me? You understand you were speaking to the dead woman yesterday out at Lost Creek, and apparently also in the bar last night, so I need to go into things a little more in depth in your case, said Campbell reassuringly. Sure, Colonel, said Spidel. I don't know what I can tell you, though. I never met the woman before yesterday out at Lost Creek. She just walked up and started a conversation about Tesla energy. Anything else? She wanted to know what I did, how life was in the Republic for the average guy, that kind of thing, said Spidel. Just conversational. How personal did the conversation get? Asked Campbell. You mean was she trying to ring your chimes? Asked Campbell bluntly. Huh? Asked Spidel in confusion. I never even saw her before yesterday. But yeah, she was friendly, kind of, well, these American women, they're all, you know what I mean. I heard you've been out there. Oh? Where did you hear that? Asked Campbell, his eyebrows arching. Come on, Colonel. Everybody remembers what you did during the war, you and that brave lady comrade. There were many others equally brave involved, but yes, I see what you meant, said Bob with a sigh. My fault. Sometimes I forget I was famous once. How can you forget being a national hero? Asked Spidel curiously. Oh, it can be done, with practice and effort, said Bob. Anyway, Bella Sutcliffe was flirting with you out at the site, and later on in the hotel bar, possibly trying to lure you up to her room? Well, yeah, maybe. Spidel was truly sweating now. Look, Colonel, I kidded around with her, but I never would have done anything like that, I swear. My wife would kill me. And you told her that? Bob asked. Yeah. She thought it was funny, believe it or not. Yes, I think she would have, replied Campbell with a sigh. If Americans aren't screaming that we're evil incarnate, they think we're quaint. I don't know which is worse. Mr. Thiessen says you were the next person to leave the hotel bar after Miss Sutcliffe. That right? Yeah. I left at maybe 10 after 11. You didn't see her again in the hallway? You didn't go down the corridor by the desk that leads to the indoor pool? No, absolutely not, said Spidel firmly. I had to get to bed. I got up early this morning and I was about to hit the road. but then those kids found the body. I really need to be in Free Helena right now checking out the main transmitter. Are we done yet? I really need to get going. Bob glanced over and he saw Tom Horakova beckoning him. Excuse me a moment. He walked around the pool. Yes? Tom grinned at him. Question. You go to a lot of old NVA shindigs with Jason, right? Yes, said Bob. Why? Ever run across Commandant Billy Basquine from the Corvallis flying column at any of them? Couple of times. He was a lean, mean bastard and he deserved every bit of his rep. Why do you ask? You remember about 4 years after Longview when the government finally figured things had settled down enough to where we could start passing out the medals and commendations? When the old NVA Association was formed for those who were volunteers during the guerrilla war, before the changeover when the NVA became the NDF? Yes, at the end of the July days, if memory serves. I was 14 and Missoula was still occupied then. No, I tell a lie. I was still 13. And this has what to do with our case exactly? Asked Campbell. It's relevant, maybe. That's when yon laddie Dave had his little contretemps that earned him a file, explained Horakova. A thin one, admittedly. 28 years ago? Yeah. This happened in Bend, Oregon. There was a desk at the local party office where former volunteers could come in and fill out the form for their veterans' benefits and all the little extras NVA vets get, plus the right to wear the decoration and the roundel on their civvies. Actually, it was just a table in the lobby in this case. One day, Billy Basquine was in the office, and the guy on regular duty goes on his lunch break, so the commandant himself sits in for him. Yeah, I recall Jason telling me that was Billy B., no job too big or small, during the war or after, replied Campbell with a nod. Anyway, in comes young Spidel, and he fills out the form for NVA benefits and the medal and hands it to Basquine, whom he apparently doesn't know by sight, which was odd right off the bat. Then Basquine sees the form isn't filled out all the way. Horakova began to chuckle, so Basquine asks Spidel what company he was in, who was his company commander, who was his brigade commander, who were the required 2 other volunteers who would vouch for him, so forth and so on. Spidel says, I wasn't with an actual NVA unit. I was on special duty. What kind of special duty? Basquine asks him. In response, Spidel pulls a sheaf of papers out of a shopping bag and plunks it down. Old computer screenshots of a blog. Okay, long story short, Spidel wasn't even in the homeland during the war, never mind being a volunteer. He was a blogger who spent the entire War of Independence sitting in his mother's basement in Florida writing under an anonymous name through proxy servers on a site hosted in Kazakhstan. To add insult to injury, the stuff he wrote was so damned mild that he never even got an FBI visit. That's mild, agreed Campbell with a bemused grin. Then when the shootings, all done and the blood spilled, he comes slithering home and demands full NVA bennies for his so-called service. I assume Commandant Basquine was duly impressed? Queried Bob. When he finally realized what the story was, Basquine jumped up and beat the living crap out of Spidel, then arrested him and dragged him down to the guard station and turned him in as a counter-revolutionary. Which he wasn't, he was just being an asshole. Yeah, even in the Northwest Republic, being an asshole isn't against the law, although it's not a good idea in a society long on guns and individual responsibility, commented Campbell. Anyway, the guard let him go, Horakova went on, but boss ended up filing a report and making a file on him in case he showed up again in a different and more sinister context. Lying about an NVA past was considered a sign of potential trouble, and of course people who think their alleged service as a combat blogger during the struggle wasn't sufficiently rewarded can start bearing a grudge against the party that gets them into trouble. In those early days, we kept track of a lot of people with grudges, mostly people who had lost relatives on the Union side during the war and might be looking for revenge. You think that might be the case here? Horakova asked, nodding in Spidel's direction. He's borne a grudge all these years because we wouldn't give the button to a keyboard commando? Maybe, said Campbell. How about his Luftwaffe service during the 7 weeks? Was he lying about that? No, Kathy checked with the Air Command Personnel Center. That's straight up, Horakova told him. Okay, well, he's kept his nose clean for 28 years, so we won't brace him with it now. Being a jackass a quarter of a century ago doesn't necessarily translate into strangling a woman last night. It does have the technical skills to make something like that devilish X-ray bomb, pointed out Horakova. True, but how does that play out? He gives it to Bella Sutcliffe, where she steals it from him, and so he strangles her and then doesn't retrieve his infernal machine. I'm not saying forget him, I'm just saying something weird is going on here, so let's try to figure out how deep it is before we dive in. We'll keep all this in mind if his name keeps popping up. Come on. The two of them walked back over to where Spidle sat at the table. Mr. Spidle, thank you very much for your cooperation. I think you can get on up to Helena how— Thanks, Colonel, said Spidle, getting up obviously relieved. I wish I could be more help. She was a nice lady, even if she was a bit loud. You're sure you can't think of anything else, anything she said or did that might be significant? Pressed Jason. Yesterday she asked me if I could get her a plug-in Tesla UPS receptor for her laptop, so she could use it in the field, said Spidle. She said she was having trouble with the battery or something. I said she could buy one in any hardware store, but she could also buy a perfectly good battery for any American make of PC in that same hardware store. After Spidle left, Horakova looked at Campbell. She wanted a plug-in remote receptor, the kind we use to power small appliances in the field off the Tesla band. You want a better personal, computer is in perfect order? Now we know how she was going to power up the X-ray bomb, said Campbell grimly. She was going to use a 5-credit UPS receptor from Northwestern Auto. So if she got the device from Scorpius to use however the hell she was going to use it, why didn't he just spend the 5 Cs and give her the power source himself along with the machine? Asked Horakova. It can't work without juice. There was a source somewhere, said Campbell. Remember, Whistler from the bomb squad said there was enough residual radiation to indicate it had been fired up within the past day. So what happened to that power source? She stole it from Scorpius, but she forgot to get the ups with it, wondered Horakova. Scorpius stole it back from her. Still not enough data to speculate, decided Campbell. Let's go and see the Wyrick woman at the site. Maybe they've uncovered a Cro-Magnon jacuzzi.